Okay, here we go. So welcome to week one of reprogramming the I am unsafe core wound. We are going to go through a little bit about what core wounds are, and we'll talk about the origins of an I am unsafe core wound, how we acquire this wound in particular. We'll talk about some of the costs to our lives, costs to our relationships, and the ways that this shows up in our behavior today. And we'll talk about how to reprogram this today at the belief and the thought level, and also the importance of nervous system regulation. There will be homework that I'll give you and explain. But let me see. I'm just trying to get it to where I can see the presentation again. So maybe I'll stop share for a sec and then share again from here. Okay, here we go. I am unsafe. So I am unsafe is a really, really difficult core wound to carry. And it can come about by a variety of different types of experiences in early life. First of all, core wounds are an expression of trauma. Core wounds are deeply held beliefs that we acquire after we have, as a result of experiences that we have, or things that we witness firsthand, or things that we hear that are negative and that are confusing, and that we don't have the resources as small children to emotionally process. And so we tend to make self-referential meaning of these experiences. The child's mind personalizes everything as a subconscious strategy to gain certainty, and to, as children, we're learning about the world and how to be in the world and what the world expects from us and how to keep ourselves safe and alive in this world. And so when confusing situations happen, that we tend to have a need to make meaning of them so that we can protect ourselves in the future. And the meaning that we make of any given situation can be unique, but at the heart of all core wounds is basically an I am unsafe core wound. They're all little subconscious strategies to keep ourselves safe. It's like, if I believe this about myself and I project this out onto the world, I can protect myself from experiencing that again. And so all core wounds are a subconscious strategy to keep ourselves safe. They're all a version of an I am unsafe core wound, but I am unsafe is also a core wound in and of itself. And so I just included this little bit of background on trauma. Trauma is not always just like big T trauma. And definitely we can a lot of times get, even securely attached people can get an I am unsafe core wound from a big T trauma experience, like a bad accident, or a big, like a natural disaster, or some kind of big traumatic event, like a singular traumatic event that has a big emotional charge, even though it's just a singular event. That can imprint us very deeply with a feeling of being unsafe. If you've ever, God forbid, had a car accident, I don't know if you remember the feeling of, like, after that happened and you survived, it was so scary and it left a big emotional imprint on you. The next time you go to get into your car and drive, you're a little bit shaky. You feel a little uncomfortable, or maybe a lot uncomfortable. And that's what that is. It's a low-level trauma. And as your mind kind of gathers more information and context and is able to sort of process the experience that you had, that can kind of let up a little bit. But for people who, like, and for experiences that are harder to get that context and that perspective on why this happened and what I can do in the future to prevent this and keep myself safe, sometimes that it becomes more of an enduring core wound. So it becomes a little more complex. But basically, we can think of trauma as anything that causes disconnection from ourselves and anything that causes disconnection from our ability to be present in the moment. Dr. Gabor Mate has written many books on trauma, and he defines trauma as any type of upsetting experience that someone has had that they lack the resources to emotionally process. And anything that changes you in a way that makes your future responses to the world more limited, that interferes with the natural growth process. And he also says that trauma can include the things that happened to us that should not have happened, as well as the things that did not happen to us that should have happened. So that can be, referencing experiences in early childhood of abuse. An abusive household can produce trauma, and also a very neglectful household can produce trauma. And a lot of times we have a combination of both in people who have a lot of complex trauma. So understand that core wounds are an expression of trauma, and they're formed in the psyche in response to experiences that we have that we could not emotionally process, that we did not have the resources to make sense of and conceptualize. And as children, our minds make personalized meaning of anything we cannot make sense of. The child's mind personalizes everything in an effort to give ourselves certainty. In response to painful or troubling experiences, we draw conclusions about ourselves that we then reproject throughout our lives as a subconscious strategy to keep ourselves safe from the real or perceived danger that originally imprinted us. So, like I kind of described before, core wounds are themselves all of the core wounds. And on the next slide, I have a table of all of the core wounds. There's about 20 of them that we focus on. And we can reprogram these at every level, at the belief level, the thought level, the emotional level, and the behavioral level. But they're all subconscious strategies to keep ourselves safe. Like if I, through repetition and emotion, gained the belief that I am bad. That's a core wound. I am bad. I will project that out onto my future experiences in my life as though I'm assuming that people will see that I am bad and I will be shamed or I will be judged or I will be whatever I'm afraid will happen. And it's almost like by anticipating that, we can keep ourselves a little bit safer from having that experience of being judged or being criticized or being, like seen as bad. It's so painful to experience that. And so we sort of develop these very creative strategies to avoid having to feel that again. And so that's what it means to kind of project a wound out onto your life in order to keep yourself safe. And we all do this. Even securely attached people can have wounds, but the more insecure attachment, the more insecurely attached someone is, the more these wounds are going to play a role in how we show up in our lives and what we make ourselves available for in terms of just like opportunities and relationships and the things that we want for our lives. It really determines how well we're able to receive and accept and live into those things. So it's important to reprogram core wounds so that we can give ourselves that freedom. Core wounds result in a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's kind of like if I am unsafe provides a lot of great examples for this. Like if I have a deeply held belief, a core wound that I am unsafe, I also have a subconscious comfort zone of unsafety. It's like very familiar to me because I have been kind of living with this belief active in my system for maybe my whole life, maybe from very, very early childhood. And that might make me more inclined to seek out or even to allow myself to be drawn into, to invest more into unsafe situations, situations where I am sure to experience my unsafety eventually, sooner or later. And so that's kind of how that works. It's like if I'm always focused on worst case scenario, I'm a little bit less sensitive to the either maybe it could be either less or much more sensitive to the possibilities of what worst case scenario looks like. Maybe I feel like flying in airplanes is terribly unsafe because I had a family member die in an airplane crash, and so I avoid air travel, and I keep myself safe by avoiding air travel of any kind. But I also keep myself unsafe because I have a big need for emotional connection and family connection. And I have family that lives on the other side of the country that I never get to see, and I never get to invest in those relationships or experience that or receive that need being met in that very direct way. And this produces unsafety in my life. And it might sound kind of low level, but it actually has really profound effects on a life and on a psyche. It's um it's interesting to see how this shows up. So people are imprinted with core wounds because how the subconscious mind obtains its programming is through repetition plus emotion. So if I'm constantly repeating this fearful, emotionally charged belief, I am going to keep a wound alive and kind of festering. And so that also means that if I perceive unsafety in my midst, maybe I'm in traffic and somebody does something thoughtless, and I see that my nervous system is like just kind of like resonating at a higher frequency, basically. My nervous system is more keyed up due to just having this chronic I am unsafe core wound. And then when something like that happens, like in traffic or like something like that, I am on a much more sensitive, like hair trigger. I'm going to be much more inclined to respond in a disproportionate way to something like that and have a much harder time recovering balance in my system. Um, so perpetually firing and wiring these neural pathways where someone grows up thinking I am unsafe or I am bad or whatever the core wound is, um, we now believe that about ourselves and we take that out into the world with us everywhere we go. It's how complex trauma works. Trauma imprints the subconscious mind when there's something we can't emotionally process, and it gets perpetuated in the same way. It imprints our subconscious mind, and then it becomes part of our identity and our self-concept. We sort of just default to projecting that out onto our reality, whether it's actually an unsafe situation or not. Um, and this can really limit us. It means like 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, unless we've actually actively reprogrammed this wound, we will continue to invest in that idea that I am unsafe and project it out onto other people, out onto the circumstances of our lives, out onto the world. And unfortunately, it does end up becoming a huge self-fulfilling prophecy the majority of the time. Um, so here's a table of all of the core wounds. This table, unfortunately, for some reason, is missing one very important wound, which is I will be betrayed. That's a wound that we focused on. I did a mini course on that one last month, but all of these are the most common core wounds, and core wounds are kind of like the bottom rung of the ladder of basically trauma and insecure attachment. Um, so to kind of take those in for a moment. I am unsafe, you can see, is one of them. But remember that at the basis of all of these is a belief that I will be unsafe. And so so the core wounds become kind of subconscious strategies to keep ourselves safe. But and it may have made sense at the time when we developed this, whatever core wound, but often, as we get older, we become much more well-resourced, and we actually find ourselves in situations that are not unsafe, but we perceive something that reminds us of an unsafe situation and we respond to it just like it's an unsafe situation. So be aware of that. Some of the possible origins of an I am unsafe core wound are some kind of scary event at a young age, a fall, an accident, a natural disaster. Um, Children who grow up in war zones obviously are going to have big I am unsafe core wounds. So that there can be big T trauma, but there can also be small T trauma. Um, I've listed here exposure to a break-in or something dangerous or scary as a young child, living in an unsafe neighborhood or an unsafe part of the world. Those are more referencing kind of big T trauma. Having a parent who behaves in a scary way, or is always talking about worst case scenario or worst case outcomes, can imprint us with an I am unsafe core wound. Um, Seeing our caregivers in distress. Children are highly attuned to their caregivers. Caregivers are highly attuned to their children a lot like a lot. Like moms are very naturally, biologically very attuned to their babies. But moms are also traumatized sometimes, and also like sometimes extremely busy and distracted or mentally ill or just dealing with other stuff in addition to the demands of a new baby. And as attuned as a mother is to her baby, the baby is much, much more attuned to the mother, to the parents, than even they are to the baby because they don't have anything else going on in their world. The parents are the center of a child's universe, and they are hyper, hyper attuned biologically to their parents and to their parents' emotional state. And so a young child picking up on consistent distress in a parent, that in and of itself can imprint a child very deeply with an I am unsafe core wound. Um, so a lack of proper attunement from caregivers, like a lack of eye contact, attentive presence, coming toward us, responding to needs consistently. Those can produce an experience that there's a lack of reinforcement that you will not be abandoned. And little children, when we're born, and this has been researched and documented, that babies come into the world with only three biological fears: the fear of falling, the fear of loud noises, and the fear of abandonment. And so the fear of abandonment is really, really central. And, we talk about anxious preoccupied, like that is the primary wound of the anxious preoccupied, is I will be abandoned. And the fearful avoidant, because fearful avoidants have that anxious side, also can have a really big fear of abandonment. But actually, dismissive avoidants also have a really, really, really deep abandonment wound that is so deep that it's not even just subconscious, it may be unconscious. And they kind of adapt to that fear in the ways that they adapt to it. And they sort of show up as impervious to abandonment. But actually, that is really at the heart of the matter for even dismissive avoidance. It's a really big deal. So some of the behaviors that result from an I am unsafe core wound, some of the features and the costs are a chronically dysregulated nervous system, like I described before. It's like your nervous system set point is kind of always sort of hanging out around maybe a 5 or more out of 10. And so, if you're hanging out at constantly like at a 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, and then something, you encounter something that makes you feel unsafe, you're gonna shoot up to 10 much more quickly than if you were kind of operating at a much lower level of nervous system activation. If you're at maybe like a 1 or 2, out of 10. Like you're aware, you're kind of a vigilant and, not hyper vigilant, but just like aware of your circumstances and stuff. And you see something unsafe, you're going to respond to that. You're going to have a nervous system response. But if your set point is lower, you're not going to shoot up to 10 so quickly. And as a result of that, you're going to be able to keep your wits about you a little bit more in that situation and see what options you have for responding to an unsafe situation much more easily than a person who is at a set point that's much higher, that shoots up to 10 or beyond very quickly. It's going to be much less easy to see what options you have or be able to respond, consciously and skillfully in an unsafe situation, and see how that in itself can sort of perpetuate that self-fulfilling prophecy of I am unsafe. You kind of keep yourself unsafe by limiting your ability to respond to an actual unsafe situation. So another thing that we see are strong 4Fs responses. 4Fs is a shorthand way to refer to fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So those are pretty familiar to most people, but like fight is like a kind of a response to a triggering event where you kind of engage, you kind of move toward, you sort of it can look like volatility. It can look like a willingness to call someone out or to start a fight or to act spitefully or to be aggressive in in an engaging way, versus flight, where if the flight response is triggered, you are going to be more inclined to flee the scene. Maybe you physically get out of there, or maybe you just dissociate. Maybe you kind of leave your body. Your body is still there, but you are gone. You have left. That's a common thing that we see with flight response. And then freeze can be, so it can also be there, like a dissociative element there, but it can feel like the experience of being flooded, just where like you're a little bit paralyzed by all that you're perceiving and you can't really act one way or another. You're just kind of stuck in that moment, in that experience. Fawn is what we it seems like a relatively newer addition to this list of 4Fs. It's the fourth F. This is people pleasing. This is like we see this a lot in codependency. It's like if I have if I feel unsafe and I feel like I could be abandoned, if I am a burden in this relationship, I might fawn by playing small, by minimizing my needs and not ever talking about what I need and just prioritizing the needs of other people instead. Or maybe by just telling someone, like, maybe somebody approaches you or is being demanding of you or putting pressure on you or something, and you respond by just telling them what you think they want to hear to relieve the pressure. It can be any kind of appeasing behavior to kind of get someone off your case, or to kind of smooth the situation over, so in an effort to reduce the fear or likelihood that you'll be abandoned, or whatever the wound is that gets triggered in response. It can be any wound. And we're going to look at these 4Fs responses over the next couple of weeks very closely, because these are all behaviors. And what we know about behavior is that all behavior is carried out to meet some need. There's some unmet need that we have, and so we take some action that we have more subconscious associations with being a favorable outcome than unfavorable. So we've kind of gotten programmed to respond with fight, flight, freeze, or fawn in response to different circumstances. So we're going to look at what circumstances cause us to show up in which way, and try to dig into that and see what specific unmet needs are there. And we can isolate those needs and then strategize on how to pour into those needs in those situations, so that we can keep a little bit more of a range of options in how we respond. Um, People who have a big I am unsafe core wound they tend to be hyper focused on worst case scenarios or outcomes, or our minds will immediately go to worst case scenario. It's like, I can't communicate. I have a big need, unmet need, or a big boundary in this situation with this person, but I can't communicate that need because they'll become angry. It'll start a conflict. I don't know how to navigate conflict. I'll be attacked. Or maybe I'll be abandoned, and then I will be unsafe. It can kind of go like that. Even if this is usually not a conscious process. It's very subconscious, even unconscious. But this tends to be how it goes. People with a big I am unsafe core wound often feel very unwilling or afraid of leaving their comfort zone. They get very attached to comfort and safety measures. And, anything from like our routines or our practices that we rely on to self-soothe and give ourselves comfort, because it's not easy to walk around with a highly upregulated nervous system all the time. It's not good for our health, and our systems know that. And so we sort of seek out subconscious strategies for soothing ourselves that might have downsides. This can look like, binge watching binge watching shows. It can look like alcohol abuse or drug abuse. It can look like getting into unhealthy relationships with people who we know aren't good for us, but we get certain needs met from that we don't know how to get met otherwise. And so it's a little bit, it helps kind of soothe and get some needs met so that we don't have to feel that pain in addition to the pain of the wounds that we're projecting. All kinds of things that we do to just try to manage our chronically dysregulated nervous system can look like those kind of things. And it causes us to be either actively avoiding or just unavailable for opportunities that we would want to take otherwise, for jobs, relationships, things that you would want for your life. And another really, really common big feature of an I am unsafe core wound that shows up in our behaviors and has associated with a lot of costs to our lives and our relationships is having poor boundaries with ourselves and with others. A lot of times we will bulldoze our own boundaries um, as a subconscious strategy to access comfort, or to help ourselves feel safe. And then we develop a subconscious comfort zone of being boundaryless. And so we let other people bulldoze our boundaries. It can be very complex in how this plays out, but that's just kind of a simple description of how that can look. Are there any questions coming up right now about anything I've covered so far, which has been a lot? How does this show up for you? What do you experience when you feel your I am unsafe core wound triggered? I invite you to just take a moment and reflect and see what comes up for you. If you'd like to speak up, feel free.
I'll just say as a blanket answer that all of this is extremely relatable. Um, and the the signs for sure for me are related to just my nervous system being triggered. That's my first sign that I'm aware of. Um, and depending on the situation, I will fall into one of the four Fs. And it does seem to be conditional on what that situation is and what it allows me to do. It's almost like if I can't fight and I can't flight, then I'll freeze.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then fawning is interesting. I know I've recognized it, um, but it comes about in a different way.
Yeah, good. Very good awareness. Try to notice and pay attention if you can, like what which of the four F's gets triggered in which type of scenario, just as a sort of avenue of inquiry. And another question I
Right.
have for you are like, what are your go-to nervous system regulation strategies, healthy and unhealthy? And you can answer out loud or just answer mentally, but try to notice, like, what do you do in those moments, either to recover after being triggered or as a strategy to sort of like just like manage a chronically upregulated nervous system.
Right. My number one go-to is nature.
Nature,
It
that's
really
great.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, super good. It's really important to identify the things that work really well for us and um and really invest in those, especially the healthy ones. And there's a lot of healthy ones. Sometimes when we have some unhealthy ones, um, those are like, they can be very easy and very immediate and very easy to sort of prioritize. But if we can look at the downsides of those, sometimes it can be very valuable. And then we can look at the upsides of the ones that are healthier and more, like just more sustainable and have fewer downsides and just see how we can bring more of that into our lives. And that's going to be a big part of the homework. And honestly, like it doesn't have to be huge. It can be very near at hand. If you live in a place like Florida or other places, it's sometimes much more easy to gain access to nature. But sometimes it's not that easy, and sometimes it's good to have something very near at hand to access to sort of give yourself a little bit of self-soothing. But if it's not something we're accustomed to doing, it's important to understand that sometimes we have to cultivate these habits. And we have to take it on as a little bit of a project, to really cultivate that over a few weeks in order to really sort of like train ourselves to go to that. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Anything else? Any other reflections or any questions coming up for you?
Um, I can relate to, yeah. So meditation for sure
Mhm.
is my, like, if I have nowhere to um flight to, then it's meditation and just dropping inward as best I can in the moment. And I, what I have noticed about the unhealthy, um, I guess, unhealthy responses is that they tend to, they not tend to, they always seem to perpetuate and compound the issue over time. So they're like a momentary relief, but they just compound the issue over time.
Yeah, that's a great share. Thank you for saying that because it really is true. And that's just considering the costs of some of those can often be enough. Like really looking at the costs can kind of can sometimes help mobilize those and leverage our choice to go to different things that are a little bit more just have fewer downsides that are effective. So thank you for sharing. um, our reprogramming plan for this wound is we're going to start with the belief level using auto-suggestion reprogramming, and it will also include cognitive reframes and generating some auto-suggestion prompts from those cognitive reframes. So the thought and behavior and belief level will be kind of woven together. And then the emotional level is going to be so important. Like, and so we're going to kind of start with BTE and just get ourselves really, really established in these as a practice for the duration of this course. And then over the next 3 weeks, as we kind of keep that going as a baseline, we're going to really take a look at the needs that we get met through our 4F's behavioral responses, try to identify and isolate those needs and strategize how to pour into them in conscious, proactive ways that help us feel like we have more range. We have more, it'll like, if those needs buckets are already like full, a little bit full, we're not going to so readily, so immediately, so automatically launch into flight mode as a subconscious strategy to meet some unmet need, because that need won't be so unmet. It won't have that quality of urgency to it. So that's the strategy there. And then the last, at the end, we're going to do like a deep dive into boundaries. And we're going to do as much of the boundary work as we can, in terms of like looking at what beliefs we have about our boundaries and see if we can poke some holes in those stories, and then just doing an audit of our boundaries and seeing where we need stronger boundaries, both in the relationship with ourselves and in our relationships with others in each area of life. So some big projects in this one, but my intention is to kind of get you set up so that you feel very confident and able to kind of continue to do this work on your own. But the most important element for reprogramming this wound is at the emotional level, getting like a nervous system regulation habit dialed in, and if, like an effective one, so that we can practice that and teach our nervous system to have a different set point that is below a 5 out of 10. Um, so that's going to be the nervous system regulation practice. If you already have something that really works for you, that's great. If there are some ways that we can fortify that or improve that and make it even more effective, that's great. I'm going to record a recording for you to use, and I'd like you to use it daily as kind of a body scan that includes a little bit of the belief reprogramming. So I will record that and send it your way within the next day or two. And so you can have that to use. But if you already have something that you use, just double down on that. That's going to be the most important thing. But the other most important thing is working this out at the belief and the thought level. I have here some auto-suggestion belief reprogramming tips, but actually what I'd really like to share is not that, but this. So this is the worksheet that I'm going to send you for this is basically the homework for the belief level. And I want to go through this right now. Where, how, by what means do you presently source safety in each area of life? Think about the financial area of life. What do you presently have that, when you remember you have that, gives you a felt sense of safety in your body? For me, I have like, I've shared this before recently, like this, I got like this app that tells me my credit report, and I've been paying my bills on time like for the past few years, really consistently, and I've gained a credit score in the excellent range. And I have this little app that updates me on my credit score, and it's like shows me on this little dial that it's in the excellent range, and I have like a screenshot of that. So if I flash the screenshot of my excellent credit score, I feel that in my body. It lands in my legs as a felt sense of safety in this world. It's like, at least I have credit, you know? So what do you have? What works for you? Maybe you have investments that are growing, or maybe you have an IRA that is increasing by way of compound interest. Maybe you have a savings account that you're contributing to and you're seeing those numbers get bigger. What do you source in the financial area of life as as access to safety? Write it down. And in the career area of life, where do you source safety in your career? Maybe you have a very secure job. Maybe you don't. Maybe your job is a little bit iffy at the moment, but you really know that you're great at what you do. You are confident in that. And why do you know that? This is what in the auto suggestion prompts, like start broad and get more specific. You can write like, I know that I'm good at my job. That is like a broad statement. And then a more specific piece of evidence will be like, remember when I received this award for the work that I did, or remember when I got this compliment from this coworker. And the more detail and specificity you can weave into that, the better. Like, remember what they said. Remember just like let it return to you in the form of your memory, but let it generate an emotion and imagery in your mind as you remember that, and let yourself source safety in the career area of life by way of that memory. And, like for this part, I suggest finding one thing for each area of life that you can almost like have a snapshot of it, like I have that screenshot of my credit score. I have like for my career, maybe I have a snapshot in my mind of my appointment book all filled out. Like I have a full week of appointments. I have abundant work. Um, I can remember, things that people have said to me and things that make me know that I'm good at what I do and that I could, that I can trust in that. I can rest in that. Um, in the mental, intellectual area of life, what's one really powerful thing that you can sort of give yourself a snapshot of as evidence of your safety in this area of life? Maybe it's just the fact that you are in this course and you're finding that you can think about this differently, just realizing that the result of an I am unsafe core wound is that you are hyper oriented to unsafety. And actually, there's a lot of evidence that you are in fact safe. And so just seeing how you can shift your thinking, your orientation to focusing on the ways that you do have safety can be a way to source that in the intellectual or the thought, the mental area of life. What works for you? Where do you source safety in the mental area of life? Write it down, find something really potent there and keep that. And in the emotional area of life, what do you do to keep yourself safe emotionally? Where do you source emotional soothing when you feel unsafe in healthy ways? What what feels emotionally comfortable to you? Maybe like wrapping yourself in blankets, lighting candles at home, having a nice quiet evening with a lot of like comforting, um, like sensually pleasing things in your environment, something like that. Maybe you source safety in emotional connection with a pet or a person or an activity. Try to notice what really resonates for you and write that down. In the physical area of life, where do you source safety? This one's my favorite one. I feel like I have the most really good, impactful. I always think of my doors in my apartment. I have really, really strong, heavy wooden doors and sturdy, good locks on my doors. And just picturing my doors in my apartment, I feel that it lands in my body and I feel my nervous system activation come down a tick just from bringing that mental imagery to my mind. So see if there's something like that for you. For me also, like I grew up feeling very unprotected in my life. And I have, like, at age 39, actually, I started studying self-defense. I started studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been practicing and learning that very consistently now for over 5 years. And I feel like I can source a very reliable sense of safety in my ability to defend myself. So that's there. But what lands for you? What comes up for you in the physical area of life as a really reliable, sturdy source of safety? And in the relational area of life, think of times when you have felt safe with certain people, with friends. Think of maybe you have a friend who you always feel like you can be yourself around, who they accept you unconditionally. If you have that, just remembering that friend and remembering specific memories, um, specific things you've experienced with that friend that make you know that this is true. Like, what is it for you? Um, and like it doesn't have to be a big thing either. It can be a very small thing for any area of life, really. Even the little tiniest things count. Um, So in family relationships, sometimes that's the hardest place to find a source of safety if we grew up in an unsafe home. And like if you just can't find anything there, that's okay. You can skip that one. If you can get enough good evidence for every area of life except maybe one or two, that's all right. It's going to be just fine. And sometimes we have friends or pets that feel like family, kind of chosen family. And we can kind of put those into that place. Can you remember a time when you felt safe in a romantic relationship, or where you sourced a felt sense of safety in a romantic connection? Even if it was not a very safe relationship, if you can remember even a moment of safety, you can just remember the feeling. We sort of use these prompts to evoke emotion, right? Remember, the subconscious mind is programmed through repetition plus emotion. So what we're doing here is reprogramming our subconscious mind the same way that it was originally programmed, just with upgraded programming, with that is more oriented to the reality of the situation, which is that we have a lot of safety in our lives. We can source safety in our lives, and we can through repetition and emotion, the more emotional resonance these things have, when we remember them repeatedly, we kind of like run through this little slideshow of memories in our mind daily, maybe twice a day, maybe more. That is going to reprogram our subconscious mind to like away from that all or nothing way of thinking, back to a more balanced perspective. And that in itself is going to help bring our nervous system activation, our nervous system level down below a 5 out of 10. And so do that and have like write those down, have those near at hand, and memorize them. You can continue to refine them. You don't have to be stuck on them. You can continue to refine them and upgrade them as we go, but definitely like identify something for each area of life or most areas of life, um, so that you can have those near at hand when you go through the guided process that I'm going to record and send you. And then this is extremely important, and this is going to be very, very impactful. Write down every single day one action that you can do to help yourself feel more safe. And kind of the way this starts is like asking yourself, in which situations does my I am unsafe wound get triggered? What happens there? Notice if I respond in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, like what does that look like? And you can ask yourself these questions. What are my options to keep myself safe in each of these scenarios? What if a worst case scenario happens? What will I do to increase my safety? Like whatever you can do to kind of like leverage some inspiration, some thoughts, some ideas, some possibilities of safety in those situations. And then every day, without fail, write down at least one new thing each day that you could do to keep yourself safer in those situations that trigger your I am unsafe core wound. Even if you don't feel like you have full access to that option right now, just coming into relationship with it, holding it in your mind as a possibility of an option to keep yourself safe, and then realizing like there's a skill that I could learn, and just but bringing it into your mind as a possibility of accessing safety, but also like look for where you actually can give yourself more safety in these situations that trigger your I am unsafe core wound. Do it in moments where you're regulated. A really good way to do this would be to kind of doing the homework, these two homework steps in reverse. One, decide on a daily nervous system regulation habit that you will stick with and practice it each and every day. I'm definitely going to give you a guided process that will include a body scan guided relaxation. It won't be too long. It will be just something that you can use to sort of like really feel in and consciously relax your body. And then in that relaxed state, go through and remember that slideshow. Basically, like I'll give you prompts to help you remember each um, little thing in each of the 7 areas of life where you can and do presently have safety in your life. And then after that, maybe sit down and just write one new action you could take to keep yourself safe in scenarios that you do get triggered. So that's the homework. That's how it starts. And I really want you to do this every day without fail for the duration of this course. Um, make this commitment to yourself and you will notice the effects. Um, if you need help, if you need support, please reach out to me. Another thing that I want to invite you to do that is very near at hand is to just cultivate the habit. Like, notice where you feel tension in your body. When you feel like your unsafe wound is a little bit pushed on, where do you find yourself unconsciously holding tension in your body? I know that you're familiar with where you do this, and if you are, great. If you're not, that's okay. You could just find out. Try to notice, like, do I clench my jaw? Like TMJ is a really, really big indicator of an I am unsafe core wound. TMJ dysfunction, I should say, pain in the jaws, migraine headaches, because of just like clenching. We can sometimes clench our hands or keep our shoulders up next to our ears, or just hold a lot of tension in our upper bodies, sometimes our lower bodies too. Just get very curious about your patterns, and you can use the guided relaxation that I'm going to offer to help you explore this. Just notice where it tends to creep in the strongest and the soonest, and where it's hardest to let go. And just be very accepting and compassionate around that tendency. Notice this is just your body, mind, doing whatever it can to try to keep you safe. And like that's a very sweet thing. But it's like we need to bring this into balance because it's not actually keeping us safe. There are better ways. And so we want to respond to this by first discovering where that tension arises, and then throughout the day, all throughout the day, checking in with those areas and seeing what you can do to relax some of that tension. Just consciously relax your jaws, consciously relax your scalp, consciously relax your hands, consciously relax your shoulders, consciously relax your butt. Whatever it is, wherever you hold your tension, you're going to need to cultivate a habit that you practice throughout the day to consciously let go of that tension. And if you do it every day, it's going to take some practice at first. It's going to be a little less frequent at first. You're going to have to teach yourself to remember, but it will come. I'm sure you've taught yourself to do things before. This is a subtle thing that's very near at hand. It's just your body. It's right there. It's with you all the time. So you're going to have to cultivate that, and then it gets easier the more you do it. And soon it will just be a habit, because basically when we have this tension that we're holding all the time in our bodies, it's sort of sending a message. Our body's sort of sending a message to our minds that we are unsafe. And then our mind, that is kind of contributing to that upregulation. But if we can consciously relax the body, we can send that signal to our minds that it's okay. We can relax. We're safe. And so that is going to be very important too. And it's just a habit you have to build, and it will build as a habit in the same way that orienting yourself to where you have safety in your life presently will also become habitual in your way of thinking and relating to the world. I mean, we've all had this experience, like when we decide we're going to take a new route to work, or maybe like the way that we usually go is unavailable because of construction or something, and we have to take our new route. We all have this experience of wanting to return to our old route just by default, just out of habit. And we have to really put a lot of conscious thought and a good amount of energy into remembering for the first several times that, oh no, we have to go this way now. It's going to be like that. And neuroscience research has proven that it takes about 3 weeks to like to really lay down and fire and wire and really kind of like make permanent new neural pathways. So that's why it's important that you do this every day and that you do it for the whole duration of this course. We're going to go 4 weeks just to make sure, because often an I am unsafe core wound can be very, very deeply held, even more deeply than just subconscious. Sometimes it's in unconscious territory. And so it might take longer than 3 weeks to get this really sorted out, but stick with it and just stay interested. Just run the experiment. It's just for a month. Um, I will say also that if you come up against a lot of resistance to doing this work, that's okay. It's normal. And it's actually another feature of an I am unsafe core wound. This is your, like this wound is here to, you develop this as a strategy to keep yourself safe. And it has not been serving you very well, but it has been serving you in the way that it has for your whole life up to now. And so just like it's there's going to be some resistance to letting that go. It's like, no way. This is keeping me safe. I need to stay safe. I've got to hold on to this. But if that comes up very strongly for you, there are some good cognitive reframes you can bring in, like just imagining some of the downsides of having a chronically upregulated nervous system. Times when you have responded with a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response that ended up putting you at a disadvantage, that kept you from getting your needs met actually, because you were prioritizing those in the moment survival needs. There were other very important needs that may have gone chronically unmet as a result. So come into relationship with those and see how you're actually keeping yourself safer by neutralizing this wound, giving yourself more range and more access to just better, better strategies for keeping yourself safe. How does that sound? Are you up for it? Are you up for the challenge? Daily nervous system regulation, daily subconscious belief reprogramming. What do you say?
Thank you. Definitely.
Good. Awesome. Any questions? Anything need to be clarified?
Not today.
All right. I'm going to send you
This
this
is
recording.
perfect.
Good, good. I talked a lot. I feel like I lecture way too much. Hopefully it's interesting and engaging. Hopefully there's enough resonance that it stays interesting. But I will send you the recording. I will send you the homework worksheet, and I will record that guided process probably tomorrow at the latest and send that out too. But in the meantime, just like think about what's worked for you in the past. Where have you, yeah, write down where you currently presently source safety in your life. And you will notice that just by thinking and dwelling on those things, you will notice the effects in your body. And know that if you encounter resistance to that, that is also good. That is progress. That means that you're touching on something that is really important, and that's just part of the process, and it's going to be fine. All right. Cool.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're most welcome. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your attention and for your vulnerability, for your wonderful shares. And I will get this material to you right away, and I will see you in a week. All right. Thank you.
Perfect.
Bye for now.
Bye.